Look, there is so much information out there online. A lot of it is contradicting. So for example, there's a lot of people that'll claim you should never track your nutrition, or you really don't have to, and you should just eat intuitively. I'm not of this school of thought for several reasons that I lay out in almost every single video. On the other hand, there's people that say, well, yeah, you should track calories, but don't worry about the macros. And there's other people that say, you know, only track macros and not calories, and all these different schools of thought. Well, you know me, I like to stick to fundamentals, things that actually move the needle forward, things that we know are true. So we're going to discuss exactly why it's important to track macronutrients on top of calories and what it means for your muscle gain and your fat loss. So let's go. What's good, YouTube? It's Coach John back again, repping Beyond the Iron. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I drop weekly content covering lifestyle, fitness, health, nutrition, fat loss, muscle gain, all that good stuff. If you're interested in achieving your goals in any of those areas faster and in a more enjoyable way, make sure you hit that subscribe button, notification bell, and the like button while you're at it. Also, I do want to mention that my one-on-one premium coaching does have some spots open. If you're interested in working with somebody to help you get to your goals faster and skip through the years of trial and error required to get there on your own, make sure you apply with the link down below. We'll jump on a call and see if we're a good fit to work together to get you to those goals. Now, keep in mind, this is not a video telling you how to calculate your macros. I have other videos going into detail about how to do that for both fat loss and muscle gain. You can check them out by clicking up on the cards up top there. So before we discuss the importance of tracking macros and actually hitting an appropriate macro split, I want to briefly go over each macro and the role that they're going to play on the surface when it comes to your fat loss, muscle gain. So starting off with protein. Protein is great because it obviously helps us build and recover and repair muscle tissue and basically any other tissue in the body. It also is a very satiating macronutrient, meaning it fills you up a lot more than something like carbs does. Like I mentioned, it's very important for recovery and it needs to be prioritized when you're in a fat loss phase. Now for fats are important because they help regulate and produce hormones, okay? So obviously that's important for reasons hopefully I don't have to explain here. Fat is also even more satiating than protein as it helps slow down digestion and absorption of nutrients in the body. And of course, it acts as a secondary energy source. So that's what stored fat is. When you require extra energy, stored fat is essentially a backup form of it. And carbs, of course, a lot of people like to alienate carbs, but in fact, carbs are very important, mostly for performance purposes. Okay, no athlete is on keto when they're trying to perform their best in an event or competition. So performance, carbs are number one for. And they're also protein sparing. A lot of people don't realize that by eating carbs, you actually decrease the chance of your body going into its protein stores, aka muscle, lean mass, pulling from those for energy. So the more carbs you're intaking, the lower chance of you actually breaking down muscle and other protein for energy. So it is the primary source of energy. Keep that in mind. It is more important than fat when it comes to a more efficient energy source. So this is why it's important. Now that you understand how each macro kind of plays its own role when it comes to body composition, performance, energy, mood, obviously having an imbalance of macros, regardless of if you hit your calories, can lead to imbalances that actually end up causing you to fall off in your diet, not feel the best, not perform well, lose muscle, all these types of things. Now, don't get me wrong, hitting calories is still the primary thing that's going to drive fat loss and muscle gain, but within those calories, there's another step. Hitting macros is important because let's say, for example, you're not getting enough protein in your diet. Obviously, I think we all understand that it's bad, but why is it bad to not get enough protein? Well, for the reasons we mentioned, you're not going to be as full throughout the day, okay? This means that there's a higher chance of you falling off the diet because you're going to be hungrier. Another thing is obviously muscle loss and not recovering from your workouts in the gym. Another great, actually the best example of this is cutting carbs too low, also known as the ketogenic diet, right? And the reason I don't like it is because it causes a complete imbalance in macronutrients. So having little carbs increases the chance of you going into muscle stores, okay, when you are in a workout, for example, any sort of bout that requires very efficient energy. If there's not that efficient energy source, your body's going to start pulling from everywhere because carbs spare proteins. And if you have no carbs, there's nothing really stopping your protein from getting pulled at. So that's one thing. If you have low carbs, your energy throughout the day may crash, okay? You might experience more cravings. You might experience a lot of other things. You're going to lose water. And then whenever you introduce carbs again, you're going to gain water. So it has a lot to do with those fluctuations. So carbs are important to keep very consistent, just like every other macronutrient. Now keep in mind, I know that there's people out there, again, coaches and fitness influencers that will claim that you don't need to track your macros because you could just find a meal plan that does it, or they will give you a meal plan that does that for you, that hits all your macros. Keep in mind, again, this is not in line with what I preach. I preach learning and teaching you how to eat instead of what to eat. So if I give you a list of foods that you can choose from, that's great. But what happens when you go on vacation inevitably, or when you go on an event, or it's a holiday or a work trip or a work party, whatever the case is, right? We have these events coming up all the time. The important part there is to learn how to eat so you can still roughly hit macros in these circumstances and calories and still move forward towards your goals without worrying about, oh, I don't have this food on the meal plan, what do I do? And then falling off and binging and ruining it all completely. So again, this is not from a school of thought of just get a meal plan or I will give you a meal plan. I don't do meal plans for this reason, because you need to learn how to hit calories and macronutrients efficiently over time. Eventually you'll be able to kind of take those training wheels off and you'll understand so much more about which foods contain which macros and how to balance them out appropriately for your life, your preferences, and so on. Not getting enough fats, right? We did not enough carbs, not enough protein. So not enough fats is going to lead to, like I mentioned, hormonal imbalances. So this can increase hunger, this can increase cravings. Again, fat slows down digestion and it keeps you full. So without it, you might be hungry a lot more throughout the day. So obviously, I think we can understand now that imbalances in either direction, low fat diet, low carb diet, it just doesn't work in the long run. So now that we understand that, here is the most important reason why tracking macros on top of calories is so vital. And that's because simply by trying to aim and hit these appropriate numbers, again, if you need to figure those out, watch the videos on it. If you're hitting an appropriate macronutrient split or close to it, this actually by default forces you to be eating roughly 80% or more of your calories, making them come from nutrient-dense sources, okay? Why is that? Well, because if you have an appropriate amount of protein, you need to hit carbs and fats, it's not possible to only eat cheeseburgers and donuts and hit those targets, because typically those foods are very, very high in fats, pretty high in carbs, and very low in protein. So if you start prioritizing protein and you realize you have to get protein from high protein sources, you're gonna realize that fast food and processed foods are not the way to go about it. And so you immediately begin to prioritize getting protein sources, right? Lean whole foods that come with that. And you're not gonna eat these lean protein sources typically with processed foods. You probably get it with a healthy carb source as well, right? Chicken and rice comes to mind, classic meathead example, right? Broccoli, veggies, right? You might as well top it off with that. And so what this does, by being aware of macros and learning how to hit them better, which I also made a video on, you can check out, doing this forces you by default to, one, start hitting your numbers with nutrient-dense foods, because it's really the only way to hit these macros in the first place. And two, it's gonna teach you again to know what foods have what macros, and that way in the future, if you find yourself at any one of these events that I mentioned previously, you'll know how to maneuver your way through it without being worried or without come crashing completely off course and ruining your progress. So again, there's those people that say just track your calories, don't worry about the rest, and that means that, hey, you can have cheeseburgers and pizza all day. The issue with that is, again, imbalance in macros is going to lead to a lot of problems that is not going to be sustainable in the long run. Whereas if you're hitting appropriate macronutrient targets, what happens is near the end, let's say you've hit most of your protein, your carbs and fats are somewhat aligned, you've got some room, right? The 80-20 principle I always mention, you've got some room to maybe fit in that chocolate bar or a burger or a donut, whatever it may be, but you fit it in after the fact, right? After you get the bulk of your calories from those nutrient-dense sources, which of course entails getting lots of vitamins, minerals, and making sure we're not nutrient deficient, and just having a wholesome diet in general. And again, I think that focusing on intuitive eating is actually putting the cart before the horse in this case, because if we really think of it as a practical example, we live in a world that is actually already imbalanced as to nutrient-dense foods versus non-nutrient dense, right? There's an abundance of fast food and processed food, packaged foods. It seems harder to get or find or get your hands on nutrient-dense foods or learn how much to eat of all those, right? So tracking calories and macros first by default evens that out and will force you to go ahead and see how much of these nutrient dense foods you need, learn to pick the ones that work best for you, the ones that help you hit your goals, and then everything else you can kind of fit within that little window that you have left over if you decide to. So again, tracking calories and tracking macros will forever be a fundamental pillar, one of the many pillars that helps you sustain your progress in the long term, whether it be for fat loss or muscle gain. Simply tracking these creates that awareness to learn how to eat, to learn what foods are typically good portions to have to make sure you're still moving towards your goals, getting healthier, getting in better shape, and feeling better along the way. So anyway, that's pretty much that for this video. I hope that I broke it down quite simply. There's a lot of intangibles that go into this video, but I hope that I was able to get my point clear across to you. If so, or if you want to know anything else about a topic like this or any other topics in general, make sure you comment them down below and I'll be happy to make those videos and follow up on that for you. Thanks again for watching. If you're new, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Everyone else, share this one with your friends, like, comment, and I will be seeing you in the next one. Thanks again. I'm out.